He left his coffee mug on the desk, his extra boots under it, his patrol schedule on the clipboard, half filled in for a rotation he didn't finish. His personal jacket on the hook behind the door, not the district-issued one, his own, the one he would have wanted on a cold drive out. He left all of it. 11 days before the rotation ended, Paul Adderley walked out of the Cooley Creek patrol post without filing a departure report, without returning his equipment, without a word to dispatch or district or anyone. He took his keys. He took himself. That's all. The district called it a personal emergency resignation. They found someone else for the post. They didn't look too hard at the specifics of what a man leaves behind when he quits without a word in the middle of a 6-week rotation in the Michigan woods in October. The notebook was there, spiral bound, blue cover, his name in black marker across the front. 22 days of entries covering what he found at the Cooley Creek treeline beginning on night 9 of his rotation, written every day until the day he stopped writing, and the next thing he did was drive away without his jacket. Dana Kowalczyk found it her first night at the post. She read it at the desk where he'd sat, under the same single lamp, with the same window behind her, the same 40 feet of cleared ground between the post and the forest, the same tree line pressing at the edge of the light. She read every entry. Then she looked up. What Paul Adderley described in those 22 days was still there. It had been there the whole time she was reading about it. It was waiting for her to look. This account is Dana Kowalczyk's, but it begins with Adderley's notes, because his notes are what broke the post open and let the thing inside. You cannot understand what she saw without first understanding what he endured. Night after night, alone in 12 by 18 feet of cinder block, with the propane heater ticking and the radio crackling, and the forest outside holding something upright in the shadow of its canopy that never came closer and never went further and was always, deliberately, just barely there. Session 1, Tape 1, recorded November 1997. The Cooley Creek post smelled like him when I arrived. Not his sweat, the specific combination of wood smoke and propane and pine duff that gets into the fabric of a place when someone has been living in it alone for weeks. 6 weeks of one-person solitude had saturated the walls. I stood in the doorway, and I understood immediately that whoever had been in this post before me had not chosen to leave it. People who choose to leave take their things. I set my pack down. I made a circuit of the room. His coffee mug, his boots, his schedule on the clipboard with October 4th through October 14th, blank. 11 days of rotation he didn't finish. The radio charger still plugged in, the propane heater still running on the tank he'd fueled. Everything in its place, except the person it belonged to. I found the notebook when I opened the desk drawer to put away my own supplies. It was sitting on top of a spare radio battery. Blue spiral cover. P. Adderley in black marker. I picked it up. I set it on the desk. I made dinner. I came back to the desk and I picked it up again. I read it in one sitting. 2.5 hours, the propane heater ticking, the forest outside the north window going fully dark. By the time I finished the last entry, I knew 2 things with equal certainty. I understood why Paul Adderley had left without his jacket, and I was not going to do the same thing. I'm going to read the notebook to you now. All of it. Not the early entries. Those are standard field work. The same records any ranger keeps, I'll summarize those. But from day 9 forward, I'm going to read it exactly as he wrote it, because the way he wrote it is part of the account. The handwriting changes. The sentences change. By day 22, he is not the same. He is the man who wrote day 9. You need to hear that happening. The first 8 days are routine. Patrol logs, invasive species, documentation. Weather data. One black bear observation in the South Meadows section. His handwriting is tight and efficient. The handwriting of a man who has been filling these forms for 9 years and does it without thinking. Nothing in those 8 days is wrong. Nothing in those 8 days is even interesting. Day 9 is the last ordinary thing in the notebook. Adderley. Day 9. Knight stayed at the desk after dark to finish the phonology notes. Looked up at some point. Don't know why. No sound. Just looked up. And there was something at the tree line. North face. In line with the dead birch I've been using as a landmark. I watched it for a few minutes. It didn't move. When the cloud cover came back and I lost it in the dark, I went to the door and stepped outside and stood there for a while. Nothing. Just the trees. I'm noting it as a large mammal observation. Unspecified. North tree line. 1823. The truth is, I don't know what it was. I know it was tall. I know it was upright. I know that when I looked directly at it, it didn't startle. It just let me look. He underlined that last part, let me look. The line is the only underline in the first 8 pages of the notebook. He's already feeling something about the letting. Most animals startled at a direct human gaze, or turned, or ducked into cover. This thing stood in his direct attention, the way something stands when being seen is a choice it has made. He gives it 3 days before he mentions it again. Day 13. Adderley. Day 13. Back at the north tree line tonight. I've been watching for it since day 9, and tonight was the first time I've seen it again. Which either means it's only been there twice, or I've been looking at the wrong time. It was in the same position. Same bearing from the post window. Same depth in the shadow margin. I want to be precise about the depth because I've been thinking about it. It's not at the tree line. It's set back from the tree line, far enough that the shape doesn't resolve into anything I can name. Close enough that there's no question the shape is there. I've been in these woods long enough to know the difference between a tree and a thing that is choosing to stand near a tree. And this is the second one. A thing that is choosing to stand near a tree, not hiding behind it, not using it for cover. As standing near it, deliberately, at a distance calculated to produce a specific perceptual effect. Paul Adderley was 9 years into this forest. He knew its shadows. He knew the way a vertical form in an October tree line could fool the eye at dusk, the way a birch snag caught the last light and looked for a moment like a standing figure. He'd spent 9 years building a precise internal library of what the Manistee Forest looks like at every hour of every season. He knew he wasn't looking at a tree. Day 15. This entry is longer than anything he's written. Adderley. Day 15. I've been sitting with the position question all week, and I want to write something down while I'm still thinking clearly about it, before the seeing starts to blur my thinking. It's not hiding. That's the thing I keep coming back to. If it wanted to be hidden, the forest behind it is 500 feet of dense hemlock, and it clearly knows how to move through that forest, because I heard it once, just once, moving through the stand on the east bank, and I couldn't hear it. 500 pounds moving through dense hemlock without sound means it can disappear whenever it wants to. It doesn't want to disappear. It wants me to see it, but it wants me to see it on its terms. The distance it's maintaining is deliberate, far enough that I can't confirm what I'm seeing, close enough that I can't convince myself I'm not seeing it. That margin, that specific chosen margin, is the point. I don't understand why that's the point. I know it's chosen. He heard it once, moving through dense hemlock without sound. He doesn't describe that entry in detail. He mentions it as evidence of capability, then moves past it, which tells you something about what it costs him to think about it. Some observations Adderley is not ready to sit with yet. He's ready to sit with the deliberateness of the position. He's already mapped the logic. It can disappear, and it doesn't. The not disappearing is a decision. The distance is a decision. The margin between visible and confirmable, maintained night after night with the precision of something that understands its own optics, is a decision that something has made about how to be watched. Day 16, he describes it directly for the first time. I need to tell you something before I read this entry. The handwriting changes on day 16. Not dramatically, it's still legible, still his, but the pressure on the pen increases and the line spacing tightens, the way a person's handwriting changes when they are writing something they need to get down before they lose the nerve to write it. He wrote it fast. You can see that in the page. Adderley. Day 16. I need to write the description before my brain starts editing it into something more acceptable. Tall, not human tall, the kind of tall that violates the proportional relationship between a body and the space it inhabits. The shoulders are wrong. The neck is wrong. The head sits at an angle that a head should not sustain in the simple act of standing. And the eyes, when the moonlight finds them, they are candid. I know what candid eyeshine looks like. I have been watching animals in the dark for 9 years. Those are candid eyes on that body. Nothing I was told to expect in this forest has those eyes on that body. Yes, I keep trying to make it something I was trained to make it, and it isn't. It is what it looks like. And what it looks like has no category in my training. And that is the most frightening thing I have written in 9 years of field notes. That last sentence, that is the most frightening thing I have written in 9 years of field notes. He wrote that, and then he kept going because he was that kind of person. He kept going for 6 more days before he ran. The entries from day 17 through 20 are where it unmakes him. I want you to understand what I mean when I say unmakes. I don't mean he becomes incoherent. I mean something more specific and more terrible than that. I mean that the entries get shorter and the vocabulary gets stripped down. The way vocabulary gets stripped down when a person is using every available cognitive resource on something other than finding the right word. And the something other is just enduring, just getting through the day, just making it to the next entry. Adderley, day 17. Tried the flashlight tonight, aimed it directly at the position. I wanted to see it clearly, to make a real description, to have something I could put in a report that wasn't just my word for what I thought I saw in the dark. The beam reached it. It stood in the beam. It didn't flinch. It didn't raise an arm across its face or turn away. or do anything that light does to an animal's eyes when it arrives without warning. It just stood in the beam and looked back at me down the length of it, and it held still, and I held still, and after what I think was about 20 seconds, I turned the light off because I realized I wasn't documenting it. It was letting itself be documented. That sentence took Adderley 9 years of field work to earn the ability to recognize the difference between observing a thing and being permitted to observe a thing. He recognized it immediately, the moment the flashlight beam found those eyes and the eyes held. He saw the transaction for what it was, and then he turned the light off because staying in a transaction with something that is permitting your observation felt, in some pre-linguistic part of him, more dangerous than the dark. Adderley. Day 18. I opened the door tonight, stood on the threshold. I don't know what I was trying to do. Test something maybe. See if the position would change when I was outside instead of behind glass. It didn't change. Same position, same depth, same shape that I can't quite resolve and can't stop trying to resolve. What changed was the feeling, not fear exactly, something older than fear. The word that kept presenting itself, standing there in the cold with the cleared ground between us, was recognition. Like something in me that doesn't have a name already knew what this was. I don't know what to do with that. I went back inside. I didn't sleep well. In the morning, the deer that work the meadow edge every morning weren't there. They've been there every morning for 2 weeks. Not this morning. The word that kept presenting itself was recognition. Something in him that doesn't have a name already knew what this was. He is describing a response that is not fear but is older than fear. The atavistic activation of something buried in human cognition that predates language and predates conscious threat assessment and belongs to the part of our ancestry that encountered in the dark of primordial forests things that were not prey and not predator in any framework it had words for. Paul Adderley felt that thing activate in his doorway at the Cooley Creek post. He didn't have words for it either. He tried recognition. It was the best he could do. The deer being gone the next morning is quiet, and it is the most frightening detail in that entry. The deer have better threat detection than any human who has ever lived. The deer were done. Adderley. Day 19. I've been counting the nights. 9, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That's 7 nights. 7 nights of the same position, the same distance, the same shape, at the edge of what I can confirm. I've been trying to find the logic of it. What does a thing want that behaves this way? Not food, not territory, not whatever drives any animal I've spent my career studying. Those things have purposes I can map. This has a purpose I cannot map, and the impossibility of mapping it is doing something to my sleep that I can't fix, and something to my days that I am only beginning to understand. I look at the tree line during the day now. It's never there in the day. It's only at night. But I look anyway, and the looking has changed the tree line for me. It looks different now, like a threshold I didn't know was a threshold. The forest has been his working landscape for 9 years. He has walked every section of it, in every season, at every hour. He has passed through that tree line dozens of times, and something has happened over 19 days of being watched from it that has fundamentally altered its character for him. It is not the same thing it was when he arrived. It has become the boundary between a zone where normal human logic applies and a zone where it doesn't. He can see that boundary now. He cannot unsee it. Day 20 is the entry I keep returning to. Day 20 is where I understand why he ran. Adderley, day 20, I have a protocol for everything. That's what the training is: flood events, fire, injury, missing persons, wildlife encounter, equipment failure. For every scenario, there is a procedure, and the procedure is what you follow when the situation exceeds your immediate cognitive capacity because fear or exhaustion or shock has made real-time decision-making unreliable. You follow the procedure holds you together. I have followed the procedure for 9 years, and the procedure has never failed me. There is no procedure for this. There is no field in any form I have ever been given for what I am experiencing. It doesn't threaten me. It doesn't approach. It doesn't do anything except stand at the distance it has chosen and be present. And the presence is its own kind of unbearable, because I have no procedure for unbearable. I have a procedure for dangerous. I have never needed a procedure for something that simply will not stop being there. He found the exact edge of his training. Not the failure of courage. Courage is for threats, and this wasn't a threat. The failure of the system that professional training builds, the system of categories and responses and procedures that lets a person function in difficult conditions. That system requires the situation to belong to a category. The system had nothing to run on, and the nothing was accumulating every night, entry after entry. And Paul Adderley could feel it hollowing something out in him that he wasn't going to get back at the Cooley Creek post. Day 21. His handwriting is different here. I want to describe the difference because it matters. The letters are larger. The spacing between them is wider. Not from carelessness, from the specific deliberateness of a person writing more slowly than they usually write, because they are concentrating very hard on the act of writing, using the physical act of forming letters as an anchor. Adderley, day 21. I woke up this morning and the light was on. I went to sleep with the light off. I know I went to sleep with the light off because I remember turning it off. Remember the room going dark. Remember lying down in the dark. The light was on when I woke up at 0340, and I had no memory of turning it back on and no memory of getting up. My body did something in the night that I don't have a record of. I don't know what that means. I know what it feels like. It feels like the part of me that is still working correctly is trying to protect the part of me that has stopped working correctly, and the only thing it knows how to do is put the light on. I have not slept with the light on since I was 7 years old. I am 43. I am going to leave it on tonight. His body turned the light on while he slept. 43 years old, the body decided without him. The body understood what his mind hadn't finished admitting yet, that whatever was at the tree line had gotten inside the post in the only way that didn't require it to move. Not through the door, not through the window. Through 21 nights of watching him from the margin between light and dark, between visible and deniable, until the watching had crossed whatever distance it needed to cross it and arrived inside his nervous system. Day 22 is the last entry. I'm going to read it slowly because it deserves to be read slowly. Adderley. Day 22. It was closer tonight. Past the tree line, in the cleared ground. I was at the window, and it was there. And it was not in the shadow margin where it has been for 21 nights. It was 25 feet from the tree line edge, out in the open, standing in the open ground that it has never entered before, in the same position it always holds, upright, still, facing the post, but closer. The rule changed. I don't know what the new rule is. I know that something about the 13 nights of the same distance constituted a rule. And I know that the rule just changed. And I know that I have no idea what the new rule means, because I never understood what the old rule meant. I only understood that as long as the old rule held, I could hold. I can't hold the new rule. I don't know what the new rule is asking of me, and I don't want to find out, whoever reads this. What it's doing is letting you see just enough. It has always been letting you see just enough. Moving closer is the same thing. The enough just changed. I don't want to be here when the enough changes again. The enough just changed. That is the last line. Not a dramatic close. Not a declaration of departure. He wrote it, and he closed the notebook, and he put it in the drawer, and he stood up from the desk, and he took his keys, and he walked out of the Cooley Creek post in the clothes he was wearing, and he left his jacket on the hook and his coffee mug where it sat, and he drove out of the Manistee corridor, and he did not come back. He left the notebook. He left it for whoever came next. And I looked up from the last line, and the tree line outside the north window of the Cooley Creek post was doing what Paul Adderley had spent 22 days trying to find words for. I'm going to describe what I saw from the north window of the Cooley Creek post in the hours that followed the last entry in Adderley's notebook. I have been preparing this description for 3 weeks. I have rewritten it in my own notebook approximately 15 times. What I'm going to give you now is the version that feels truest. And truest doesn't mean most comfortable. It means most accurate. It means the version where I haven't softened the thing I saw into something more manageable. When I looked up from the notebook, the cleared ground between the post and the forest was empty. 40 feet of frost-pale grass and dead sedge, empty. But the tree line was not. Set back from the tree margin in the shadow of the hemlock canopy, in the position Adderley had described for 21 of his 22 days. A shape, the precise position, the precise depth in the shadow, the precise distance that produced the precise effect he had named so carefully. Far enough to deny, close enough to not be denied. I had been sitting in that post for 4 hours. I had been reading his account of it for 4 hours. My back was to the window. The thing he described had been there while I was reading about it. I did not move immediately. I tell you this not as a credential, but as a true account of what my body decided. I sat still for what I estimate was 30 seconds, the notebook still open in my hands, and I let the information arrive in the correct order. First, it was there. Second, it had been there. Third, it was going to be there, whether I looked or not. These 3 facts arranged themselves in sequence, and the sequence settled something in me. I was going to look at this with every faculty I had. I was not going to do what Paul Adderley hadn't done. He had looked. He'd always looked. Looking was never the problem. The problem was enduring. And I had read his 22 days of enduring. And I had not run yet. And I was not going to run. I looked. The shape was tall in the way Adderley described, the kind of tall that reads as wrong against the proportions of the surrounding trees, not because it reaches the canopy, but because the relationship between its height and its width is not the relationship a human body has with those dimensions. It was upright, deeply still in the way that a thing is still, when stillness is not an absence of movement, but a quality of the organism itself, something it produces the way a stone produces cold. It was facing the post. I watched it for what I estimate was 4 minutes. Then the cloud cover shifted, and the quarter moon came through, and the light changed. The eyes caught the moonlight, amber yellow, candid, at the height of something that stood 8 feet tall. They caught the light, and they held it, and they were looking directly at the post window, and then they were looking directly at me. And I understood in a place below language that there was no difference between those two things. The eyes were amber yellow. The reflective layer behind the retina, the tapetum lucidum, returns the available light in the specific color register of the species. Counted is amber yellow. Deer is blue-white. Cat is green. I know this. I have known it for 20 years. What I was looking at had counted eyes. At the height of something 8 feet tall, standing in the cleared ground of the Cooley Creek patrol post in the shadow of the Manistee National Forest, treeline, having watched Paul Adderley from that position for 22 nights, and whatever ranger was there before him, and whatever ranger was there before that, looking at me now the way it had looked at all of them, with patience, with presence, with the specific curated visibility that it had been offering every previous occupant of this post. The cloud cover returned, the eyes were gone, the shape dissolved into the shadow margin, and I couldn't resolve it anymore. I sat at the desk for a long time after. I thought about Paul Adderley and his jacket on the hook. I thought about the 30 seconds I'd sat still before I looked, and how Adderley had never done that, had never been able to do that, because he hadn't had 22 days of notes to read first. He'd had to find out in real time what I found out at the desk. The specific torture of encountering something that ancient patience, directly, without preparation, one night at a time, watching it accumulate inside you until the body turned the light on while you slept. I understood then what he had left the notebook for, not as a warning, as a gift. He had given the next person the one thing he hadn't had, the knowledge of what it was before it started. I looked at the tree line. I said, I know what you are. I don't know why I said it. I don't know if the saying changed anything. The tree line was dark, and the shape was not visible, and the forest held whatever it held, the way it always had. I left the light on that night. I left it on every night of my rotation, not because my body decided without me, because I decided, because I had read Adderley's Day 21, and I understood that leaving the light on was the honest response to the honest situation, and I was not going to pretend otherwise. It was at the tree line every night of my rotation. Some nights in the shadow margin, barely a shape. Some nights further back, just a density in the dark. A place in the forest where the dark was doing something different. Some nights closer, the position Adderley described on day 22, past the tree line edge in the cleared ground between the forest and the post. On those nights I stood at the window and I looked at it, and it looked at me, and we held that exchange in the dark without breaking it. I don't know what it got from those nights. I know what I got, the specific understanding that I was in the presence of something that has been in these woods since before the first ranger found the first trailhead, that will be in these woods after the last ranger files the last report, and that has spent a very long time perfecting the specific distance between visible and deniable, because that distance is the most eloquent thing it has to say. I completed my rotation. I filed my standard reports. I drove out on October 28th at 06:30, and I drove out at normal speed on the access road, and I did not look at the tree line as I passed it. I took the notebook. He left it for the next person, and I was the next person, and now it's mine. I read it sometimes when I need to remember that what I saw was real, not less frightening than when I first read it. Real. She tells the rangers assigned to the Cooley Creek post one thing in the informal briefing she conducts with new district personnel. Leave the light on at night. She attributes it to general safety protocol. Nobody questions it. It has been standing guidance for 6 years. Paul Adderley's notebook is in a locked box in her apartment in Cadillac, Michigan. She has read it approximately 20 times. She reads it when the encounter starts to recede into something her daylight mind wants to classify as stress-induced misperception. And the notebook refuses that classification. And she is grateful for the refusal. It is the most honest document she has ever held. She thinks about Adderley. Specifically, she thinks about the 22 days he held, going back to that window every night, looking at the thing that would not be confirmed and would not leave, writing it down in a notebook that was getting harder to write in as the days accumulated. 9 years of professional discipline brought to bear on something that professional discipline had no category for, until the night it crossed the tree line edge and the rule changed, and his body had already made the decision before his mind finished making it. He ran. She doesn't blame him. He had been alone in that post for 22 nights, without context, without a prior account, with only the knowledge he'd built himself across 9 years of a career that had given him no tools for this. He held for 22 days. That is its own kind of remarkable. She thinks sometimes about what it has been watching from that tree line for all the years before Adderley and all the years before the first ranger, and what it has understood about people from those years. The way it maintains the distance, the way it calibrates the visibility, the way it moved closer on day 22. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just 15 feet, just enough. And that 15 feet was the end of a man who had survived everything else the Manistee had offered him for nearly a decade. Something out there knows exactly how much is enough. It has been practicing. It was in the shadow before the first ranger came. It will be in the shadow after the last one leaves. In between, it watches. It maintains its distance. It lets you see exactly what it has decided you should see for exactly as long as it has decided you should see it. Not threatening, not retreating, present, in the way that only very old things are present, with the patience of something that has no reason to hurry and has never had a reason to hurry and knows it. The archive. Case files, documents, encounters for which no adequate institutional record exists. The accounts are primary source material. The witnesses are credentialed. The entities have no names.